Thanks so much, everybody, for being here today. Delighted to have you join us for this kick-off panel to the 2022 IADT Virtual Careers Fair. Really delighted to have Lara Hanlon, designer, here today. Also Dave Jackson, co-founder and UX director, and Killian Fitzgerald from Avatar Post-Production as well. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves a little bit in a second, guys. But first of all, I'd love to welcome everybody in terms of the audience that we have here today. And I'd like to hand over to David Smith, who is our president in IADT, and he's going to say a few words. So thanks very much, David.
Thanks very much, Dawn. Good morning, everybody. Good to see the numbers kind of creeping up here as we go live for this year's launch of our Careers Fair. Absolutely delighted that this year, coming off the back of COVID, we've been able to run both a virtual event, which we're hosting today with a number of panels, 5 extra panels throughout the day, and we'll have on-campus activities as well. So it's really important to see kind of activity back on campus. I think it's behoved me to thank Dawn and her team in the first instance for kind of all of the work that's gone in. I think it's been double the work this year. The virtual piece that we did last year, we were very well practiced in that, but to run the parallel physical event on campus is at another level. So I'd like to recognise the contribution that Dawn and her team, Rebecca Roper, Stefan Paz Barrios, Rachel Sarsfield Ryan in IADT Students Union, and Elizabeth O'Brien, who's assisted there, and Caroline Healy, who's our able technical assistant in the background. The event is really important for IADT for a number of reasons. I think that it started a number of years ago as a very small, localized event focused on the technology department in IADT, and it was about creating kind of pathways for students leaving those programs. And over the last number of years, it has grown to such a degree. I think we have 40 companies participating today, and it goes beyond that when we look at the alumni and panelists making a contribution. What that indicates is that the strength of the offer of IADT and the profile of the programs within the institute have immense value beyond its core kind of area in the creative and cultural industries. And today, with this panel with Lara, Dave, and Killian, we're looking at, graduates and industry partners that work at the intersection of design, technology, and wider media and audio visual industries. And I think that is that reflects an aspect of the breadth of IADT, but it's only part of it. And I think if you engage with us over the rest of the day, you will see the full scope of offer and opportunity that exists. And I hope that there's real value created today, and that there are students and our future alumni and graduates, that they all actively engage with the participants and the companies on campus today as well. So I'd like to thank you all for obviously participating, but importantly, with our launch panel, I'd very much like to thank Lara, Dave, and Killian for their commitment, and I'm very much looking forward to their insights and engaging with them over the next hour or so. So thank you very much, and the best of luck, Dawn and co, today. All the best.
Thanks so much, David. I really appreciate that. And thanks for the kind words as well. So guys, I just wanted to really start. We've got kind of, a bit of time here to kind of work with, but, if we could start, I suppose, at the beginning of your journey somewhat. It's very interesting for us, and it's very interesting for our students to start to think about, what are the skills, and our graduates, of course, to think about what are the skills that are really required in your industry at the moment. And I suppose one of the questions that always kind of brings me into that in some respects is, what would you tell your younger self starting out now? So if your younger self was starting out now, what is it that you would kind of say to them in terms of advice that you would give them? And that goes to anybody, so you can just jump in.
I think for myself, I started working for myself at quite a young age, so I actually only got industry experience. I only got kind of 2 years working in the industry before I started working for myself, and I'd probably go back and tell myself not to work for myself so quickly, because I think as a junior, you learn a lot quicker with other people, and I think if I'd spent maybe another couple of years working in agencies and stuff like that and learning off other people and not learning on my own, it would have helped me. But it's not a major regret, and it's really just a small thing, really.
Okay, so in terms of your trajectory, because I suppose Yeah, go ahead, Killian.
No, after you. You're picking up there on Dave.
I was just going to say, I think there's, when you come out, there's a real impatience, isn't there, to get things started and to get things kind of done and to get it, get into this thing called career, because now I've studied, and actually what you're saying, Dave, is that actually sometimes that patience maybe is kind of required so that you can kind of build up a really a stronger skill set before you press play on that.
Yeah, and kind of understand the process and skills and your strengths and weaknesses are as important as your strengths, really, So yeah, I think a bit more time in the industry would have served me better,
Okay, thanks so much for that. And Killian, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in on you there.
No, not at all. I was jumping across you. Sorry. Yeah, I would echo Dave. I got a job straight out of college. Literally, I was picked up by the college I was at, and they said, "Come and work for us." I jumped in and started working away happily as a music engineer, and realized pretty quickly that when you're 17 or 18 and you get handed the keys to a recording studio and you get to work with all the cool artists and everything, and you're there on maybe your third or fourth week of working from 11 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning, that perhaps this isn't going to be a great career as such. It was a lot of fun, but it took me a while to realize where the crossover between having a career, making money, and being creative, where those points intersected. I wish I'd found that more quickly. I probably spent too long in the wilderness wandering around, thinking being a music engineer and recording was going to be my career path. And in fact, it's actually the hardest business in the world to make a career in my experience of work and so on. And then finding the television and film production world was a far more professionally run, smoother, and a more, I wouldn't say accessible, but a more understandable. It was run by grown-ups and professionals, whereas the music industry was a little less coordinated in that respect. And the most important thing that I did when I was young was I traveled. I went abroad. I went to work in New York when I was about 18, ended up in London when I was about 20, stayed there for 17 years. And that really, without that experience of traveling and seeing how things operate outside of our little town of Greendale, or our little world that we live in, without seeing that, I wouldn't have had the experience or the confidence to progress myself into my own business as such.
Okay, so there's some, so there's a kind of a common message here in terms of just making sure that you give yourself the opportunity to learn those skills from others in the best environments that you can, and then also to adding travel to that can just really up that to the next level again, because you're suddenly starting to see how things are done in different environments. And I mean, New York and England and are, quite different environments, I suppose.
Although we do, hearing you say that back, we are in a very, very different cultural environment in Ireland now than we were 30 plus years ago when I started. It's a very different world, but still getting out, and I went to work in big television broadcasters in London and big facilities houses in Soho in the west of London, and that was invaluable to see how the big boys played, and then to come back to Ireland with that experience and I would say confidence was hugely important.
And so do you think that, because for us, like these graduates and students are kind of coming out now, they're trying to kind of get into these industries now. So what are the key differences that you're seeing, if you're seeing that kind of, the difference between 30 years ago and today, or what is it that they need to do now that might be different from what you had to do then?
Well, it's probably the same for Lara and Dave and people who rely on technology. Most people who rely on technology, and that is, you can go out and buy a laptop and a piece of software and a set of speakers for very, very little money now, and immediately you have the tools to be just as creative as 30 years ago. The first studio I built in London with the company I worked for, we spent £2.5 million sterling. So that's not accessible to very many people. Whereas nowadays, anybody with a laptop and a bit of software can become a sound editor, a sound designer, whatever you want to call it. So it's far more accessible from that angle. However, getting access to the experience of more experienced professional people who are further down the line is getting harder, because the facilities are becoming very tightly run. They're very, very busy. They're hard places to get into, hard to get experience. So my advice to anybody coming out of college is keep knocking on doors of the big boys. Keep knocking. You will get in. They do need new blood. New blood has to come in. The older people are getting tired and worn out. And it's the people who keep knocking and who are the most persistent. I'm afraid it is the syndrome of the squeaky wheel gets the oil. You really do. You keep knocking, keep sending letters, keep ringing, keep presenting work that you've done, and appear enthusiastic. And don't give up.
Yeah, I
the
agree.
first
I think
rejection or the 10th rejection.
I
Don't
think
give up. You know.
Yeah, sorry, Dave, you were about to say there. You agree?
Yeah, it's like I'm qualified 22 years now, I think, and I qualified in 1999 when I did my primary degree. And what I'm seeing now is, like, I mean, back in those days, I mean, the thought of anyone doing a postgrad or let alone a master's, it just, didn't happen. Very, very rare. Whereas now it seems to be almost like most grads are going on to kind of further education before they go into the industry, and that's a great thing. I think it's really good, but I just wonder, is it because everyone is doing it that they're doing it, or is the standard just got higher, and does it really benefit them? Like, might they be better off going into a job, seeing what they like doing, and then going on to kind of further education and becoming more kind of specialized in an area that they know that they're interested in? I would kind of question that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's kind of different to what it was when I was starting out.
And so is that
I might just
yeah, go ahead, Lara.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of pick up on a couple of things being said. I think for me, if I was to go back to your very first question, Dawn, about if there's something I was to tell myself or tell my younger self, I don't think there is one journey that fits everyone. I think, and already we're kind of getting to that. There's lots of questions being asked, and maybe looking back in hindsight of our own careers and choices, maybe there are things that we all would have done a little bit differently or better. But I think the reality is there really is no script, right? For anybody coming out of college, no matter what course you're doing, especially though in the creative industry, there are lots of avenues. That's the reality. And sometimes you take a path and it might work out. And then sometimes you take a path and it might lead you somewhere completely different. So I think it's more about being aware that, there isn't actually one way to do whatever you set out to do. And already, Killian and Dave are kind of alluding to that, right? You might go into further education, or you might actually change your career, or you might start out on your own business, or you might join a company. And that has been absolutely true for me as well. I've changed my role as a designer so many times over the last 8 or 9 years. But there really is just no set path forward for any individual. But that's exciting. And I think as a creative, that's a challenge, but it's actually great because you can kind of start to define your own path as you start to get into that.
Yeah, and I think that
I
there's
agree.
some.
I mean, don't think
Sorry, go ahead.
too far ahead, because I mean, don't be trying to think 10 years down the line. Just kind of think about what's happening now and go with that, and kind of follow what's interesting to you at that kind of moment. I mean,
Totally.
One of the things I've kind of noticed recently, I'm doing a mentorship with the mentee, I'm a UX designer, and she just finished a master's in UX design in TUI, and got her first job, which is great, but it's for a company, quite a small company, who don't have any design people working in-house at all. There's no UX designers in there, and she's kind of in there as the lead UX designer for that company, and she's no one to kind of bounce ideas off and no one to learn off. And I think just be quite careful about your choices after college, and what you do, and make sure that you're kind of in a place where you have the ability to learn, and that kind of support. That's really important.
And that was a really smart thing to do on her behalf, to go and look for a mentor, because she realized that she was going to be kind of an island in the company that she was in, and needed to be expert. And actually, as a UX designer, you realize that bouncing of ideas is a hugely important space to be, and as a designer and as an artist,
Sure.
be able to bounce with people so that you can bring the idea to the best place that it can be, right? So not having that really kind of takes away from a lot of what you do then, and actually going out and looking for a mentor then is hugely beneficial. Like, that's a really, really smart thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so if I was to ask you then about kind of, some of your kind of, because I suppose one of the things that you've kind of alluded to there, Laura, is this, people, you're kind of saying, look, there are lots of ways, there are lots of paths, and actually your career trajectory kind of goes like that rather than like that, right? And we kind of come out of college, and we're in our first couple of years graduating, we're kind of asking ourselves, like Dave was asking himself, starting up his own business, why haven't I there already? Why haven't I there? Because I'm expecting that, right? But actually, we're kind of, we if we could realize pretty early that it goes like that, and we still get to the same point, we get to the same destination, but we have a much more kind of relaxed, in terms of colorful journey. So what are the most informative mistakes that you have made in your kind of trajectory? And I know this is a difficult question, and maybe you don't want to share the key one that that you're still kicking yourself over, but but there are definitely mistakes that have really informed your trajectory along the way, and what have they been? And I think that's really interesting. I'm giving you a bit more time by continuing to talk here. I think that's really interesting, our audience, to kind of listen to, because they feel like, oh yeah, that's okay for you, Dave Jackson, kind of, co-founder of Friday, that's brilliant for you, Killian Fitzgerald, Avatar, look at all of the films that you've been involved in. Look, Laura, you've been designing in New York, what are you talking about? Come on, like, one of your most informative mistakes have been?
Yeah, I'm going to jump straight in. I'm going to say that when I was graduating, I was terrified, honestly. I had no idea what was going to be ahead of me, and I really lacked any confidence. Like, I didn't believe in myself, and I didn't believe in the skills that I had. And I think the biggest mistake was actually I was trying to be a certain type of designer, and I was trying to fit into what I thought a designer leaving a visual communications design program should be. And I think that was the number one mistake. And it's not that I, at the time, there's nothing I could have done about that. But looking back, I kind of think if there's one piece of advice to students, it would be trust your gut and trust who you are, right? We all have something different to offer. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. There's no one path, but there's also no single type of designer in my instance. But that was probably my mistake. I was just trying to be a certain type of designer that actually didn't really suit my skill set. I had something different to offer, and I think that kind of, at the beginning, when I was setting out, I was kind of forcing myself to pursue something that actually was a little bit, not me. And I have found now where I should be, and I'm happy with that. But it took a lot of digging and a bit of an identity crisis for me over the years to be like, what am I doing? Who am I? What do I want to do? And what actually is important to me as a designer? So that's probably my biggest mistake or way of thinking at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for that, Lara.
Yes,
I'd agree with Lara.
I would agree. Yeah.
Go ahead. One of you take the lead.
I think
let the other one come in then.
I think for me, it is based around the kind of confident thing. I mean, if I think back like 10 or 15 years ago, and I would have been junior, I would have been in front of clients, and clients always come to you with, sometimes questionable ideas about what they want or assumptions about their customers and stuff like that. And it's having that confidence to back yourself and challenge them, because they're paying you as an expert, and you need to challenge them in that kind of respect. And it's very difficult as a junior designer coming in, telling someone who's probably twice your age, that what they want is probably a bad idea and they need to listen to you, But I think you need to first kind of remind them that they're paying you as an expert, and kind of back what you're saying and be able to kind of stand over that, you know. It's kind of a mindset thing, and it takes time, but I definitely spent probably 5 to 10 years of my career, you know, sitting back, letting clients push projects in the wrong direction. Okay. And the outcome, it probably wasn't as good as it could have been because of that, you know. So it is your job to steer the project, you know. You're being paid for that, so believe in yourself, you know.
Yeah, so there's both of you have kind of talked about this confidence thing in different directions. Then it's kind of like this imposter syndrome. Lara, you're trying to push yourself into something that you think that other people want, and Dave, you're kind of just not pushing what you know is right, actually, because you're thinking, okay, well, we'll let a client lead because maybe they're, you know, and that's, you can see how that would be easy to do at the start of your career. And for all of us, I think we've all been in that situation where that's happened for us. But then both of you have kind of, in some respects, found your voice in terms of that, and found that confidence, and that's the important thing. So I suppose, yeah, that's really interesting, actually. Killian, you wanted to jump in there as well.
Well, I think.
No, after you, Dave.
Yeah, sorry, Dave. Go ahead.
Just on that. So I think, I mean, I have the luxury of, like, a lot of design decisions I make are based on data. So UX is quite grounded in research. So the research will inform the design. So I have the luxury of being able to back up what I'm putting in front of a client with data and say, well, look, we're doing this because the data says so. So very hard for them to argue with that. Now, some will, and they'll say, well, you know, I don't care what the data says, I want it done this way. And in that case, you try your best, but eventually you just go, right, fine, you know, you're paying the bills, which is hard to do, but it has to be done occasionally, but only occasionally, you know. So depends on what type of work you do, and if you have that kind of research to back up what you're doing, you know. Sorry, Killian, go ahead.
I think I agree with both of you 100%, and I think a lot of that confidence comes with you developing personally as well as professionally, which for me, when I went to London and became immersed in the broadcast and the facilities world, where I went at the age of 19 or 20 to working in a company with 70 or 80 people, you have a huge pool of people that you're jumping into. There's an enormous wealth of experience. There's also, there can be a resistance to colleagues sharing experience with you, and that I found developed my confidence in being able to extract information and learn how to get the best out of people from people that weren't perhaps willing to share with me for whatever reason. So growing within a big company not only exposes you to learning all about how the account system works, how the booking system works, what do you do when an invoice doesn't get paid, and all of these things have to build your own personal experience and confidence as a professional to give you the support to work creatively. Because without that, the company doesn't work, and without the company working properly, well, it's not going to last for very long. But I found when my confidence developed, I got a lot better with dealing with clients, and as Dave said, not being pushed, not allowing a project to go a certain direction that you thought, oh, this doesn't sound right or look right to me, but to be able to stand up to the client and go, look, we know from our experience that this is not going to be great for you or us, or, you know, for the client ultimately.
Yeah.
That's where the interest has to lie.
Okay, thanks for that. I suppose I just wanted to say at this juncture, sorry, audience, you can put in a question into the questions box there. So once you put in the questions into the questions box, we'll have it up in the chat box here, and we can add it. We'll have a questions and answers piece at the end. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to throw them up along the way, and we will get to them. One question that always intrigues me about that kind of career trajectory and those learnings that you had along the way, I suppose, what were the toughest decisions that you had to make? Like, was there a really tough decision that you had to make that kind of brought you maybe another way than, you know, if we all had those sliding doors moments, if I just didn't make that decision and I went this way, actually, what would happen? You know, are there any tough decisions that you can kind of think about that occurred for you, or what stands out for you?
I think I've had a couple of businesses over the years. So I started off as a freelancer. Then I set up a small agency with a friend of mine that ran for 4 or 5 years. So I've had a couple of different businesses, and each time I've moved on to the next one, I've had to make a decision. Okay, well, I'm not challenged here, or there's a reason I want to do something else. I want to shake things up, and I think the tough decisions is the toughest part of that is knowing when to change things and actually making that leap, and not kind of waiting around to see if things happen. If your gut tells you something isn't working, do something about it quickly, or make an informed decision, obviously, but don't wait around too long for things to improve. So make that hard decision as fast as you can.
So it's kind of like fail quick, move on. That kind of idea.
Kind of, yeah.
Sorry, Killian.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And don't assume that all professional relationships are set in stone and that they're working, because often if something isn't working relationship wise with a client or a colleague, you might be the last to find out. So if you're unsure about a relationship or unsure about how things are going with a particular client, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ring them and say, is there something not going right here, or can our service be improved for you? Or just don't be afraid to ask, because often people won't come looking for you to explain or to tell you these things. They'll just disappear and they won't be booking you anymore, and you'll be going, oh, that was a good client, now they're gone, and you might never know why. So it's always follow up, always know how things are going, and conversely, when things are going very well, it's nice to fire a client an email and going, great to work with you on that project, really pleased. From our point of view, it worked out really well, hope you're happy with it, and so on. And just keep the dialogue going, because nature abhors a vacuum, and as soon as the silence is there, they'll be gone to somewhere else. That's what and also with professional relationships, if you think you have a relationship with a supplier or a co-worker, or a freelance outsource provider, don't assume that everything is going right. Just keep dialogue going with people. It's very, very important.
Okay, and Lara, do you have anything to add there? What about
yeah, sure. I think in terms of tough decisions, I think like speaking up for yourself, that's something that I had to learn over the years, is like, don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in, or call something out if it's inappropriate or wrong, or against the values of whether it's your employer or your team or yourself. So I think actually, being there, being present, and representing you as an individual is really important. And I think over my career, I've faced some tough decisions where I had to kind of put myself in a position now and then where I had to speak on behalf of myself or my colleagues, on issues that were important. So I think that kind of goes beyond the skills of being a designer or creative. That just goes into being a team player, being a member of an industry, and helping to push things forward. So yeah, I think that would be my kind of takeaway from that, is stand up for yourself, speak what you believe, and support those around you as well.
Okay, so one of the questions that's coming in from the audience then is, how do you do that? Like, how do you build up that confidence when you're moving on to other projects in industry? Like, what is it that you do, or how does that confidence get built?
Find people to support you. I'm gonna say, like Dave mentioned about your mentoring, Dave. I mentor people a lot. And the reason I do that is because mentors have been brilliant to me in my career. So I think find people who can support you. They might be advisors, they might be lecturers, employers, they might be your friends and peers, but people who can actually support your ideas and give you a platform that you can feel like, hey, actually, I can do this, or I do have the skills, or I do have the experience, and they will kind of help you, right? They'll bolster you, they'll be honest with you, they'll guide you, but they will help you a lot. And I think that can't be undervalued, you know, the role of a mentor or a peer to support you, and that will help your confidence, certainly. In my experience, it has.
Okay, so it's kind of like, you know, and thanks, Abby, for that question. It was a really good question. It's kind of like building scaffolding around yourself. So, you know, not seeing yourself as an island, actually, because we aren't. And we look for the support that we can get out there. If we're not feeling kind of, you know, if we're feeling a little bit like, you know, that imposter syndrome is kicking in, you know, who else is out there that we could start to get some advice from, even? Whose brains can pick? Really, that's how the conversation starts. You know, we talk about networking as this horrible word. We hear networking and we're going, oh, and particularly as students and graduates, we hear that word networking and it's like we want to vomit. But actually, it's not really difficult. It's actually just about picking somebody's brains for a while, having a coffee with somebody for 10 minutes and just, you know, like, you know, what's your advice around this? I'm trying, you know, even if it's, I'm trying to break into this industry. Sorry, does anybody, Killian or Dave, did you want to come in there? Or
yeah, absolutely.
I agree. I think
I agree 100%.
People are very open. People are very open to spending time with you. I mean, if you just ask, I mean, people are happy to help and give their time. But yeah, I mean, feedback is extremely important, and that'll build your confidence. So feedback from your peers, and it'll help, you know, kind of back up your decisions and tell you if you made the right decision as well, you know. And in terms of UX, I mean, as I said earlier, it's kind of data focused. So if you do a piece of work that goes out there, you can usually see if it's performing or not, and that should help build your confidence if it is working, you know. So but definitely talk to people, listen to people, and get the feedback, you know. Killian, sorry.
And yeah, I mean, I agree on that. And also within your own family, find a family member who has a strong business background, or a friend of the family, friend of your parents or relatives, and go to talk to people outside of the industry who are successful in business and whose opinions and advice you will respect. That can be invaluable as well. And also look into things like my local enterprise office here in Wicklow. They ran a business development course, which was over 10 weeks. I think it was one night a week over 10 weeks. And it was run by, I'll say, a more senior fellow. He was involved in Kerry Food down in Waterford, and very much a man who built factories that made widgets, that did things. Very practical, sound, old school advice. And that was incredibly valuable to me, because it was nothing to do with my business at all, but it was all about how to build my own confidence, how to project myself, how to understand the machinations of the business world a lot better. Because really, growing up in this little bubble of creating sound effects and mixing sound and being quite good at it, I didn't really have experience of the wider business world and how people actually are to each other. So that was very valuable, and that was nothing to do with the production, post-production world at all. It was to do with a guy who just had a lot of really good advice to impart, and I found that on my local Wicklow enterprise office. They were very helpful with that. That was a very useful course to do.
And I think that's a really good advice, actually, because a lot of people within the creative industry particularly are freelancers, or, you know, running their own business. You know, that's how they start out. They're working for themselves, essentially. And so there's lots that they have to know about kind of business and tax and that kind of stuff. And, you know, and the local enterprise office a lot of the times has all of that information. They run these courses, and it just adds, it's not exactly what you want to do, and maybe it's not going to float your boat entirely. You might hate some of it, but it definitely adds a string to your bow in terms of, you know, these are the things that you need to know. This is, you know, otherwise you're kind of losing money, and otherwise you're not really speaking to people in the way that you could in terms of getting buy-in and that kind of thing. So good advice. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I just want to say that is really great advice, and I think having business acumen and skills like that has, you know, been key for me, especially working in tech and working, you know, in a big company. Absolutely crucial. I think designers can offer, you know, the best creative thinking. They can represent consumers and customers, and, you know, they can ask great questions. But I think actually having an understanding of the business helps you communicate and articulate the value of what a designer can bring to a company or your own company, and that will help you succeed. So yeah, Killian, I think that's brilliant advice, definitely.
I've got a question here from Camilla, I think. Do you think taking a year off after graduating is okay, or would it harm your career? I love this. Would it harm your career to take a year off? And if you recommend it, how do you think you should best spend that year?
On a beach in
sorry,
Thailand.
Actually laughing at you there. It's funny how many people I deal with on a daily basis who come into me and say, I mean, I'm 25, I'm a mature student, you know, and I'm just kind of going, you've got your, you know, you've another 45 years to work ahead of you if you want it. So, you know, you've loads of time.
Yeah,
it's
not
okay.
a problem at all, I don't think.
Yeah. So, but I suppose more to the point is, yes, taking a year of graduation can be hugely beneficial actually, but you need to spend it in the right way, don't you? And so have you any ideas about what that might look like or what that might be from anywhere?
I mean, it kind of depends if you want to work or not. I mean, when I graduated, I hopped on an airplane, I think about a week after I graduated, and I went to Australia, and I started working there as a designer almost immediately. Now I don't know how I managed to get a job because I had no experience, but there was UI designers were probably high in demand at the time. This is back in the early days of the internet, you know, so we were quite rare. So yeah, I had a kind of a working holiday essentially for a year in Australia. So if you want to take a year off and just sit on the beach, I think do it. You know, absolutely. I don't think it's going to, you know, be a black mark on your resume or anything like that. And if you can, and if you want to try and get some work or an internship or whatever, you know, so absolutely do it.
Okay. Thanks for that. And by the way, can I just, as Dave was talking there about work and internships, can I give Going Global a little bit of a plug there? Because we buy a platform every year that I'm always trying to get people to use, and it's got 16 million jobs and internships all over the world in every industry. So, you know, it's behind our firewall, it's on Careers Hub. So just on that note, I'll get that little plug in there for Going Global. So like there's lots of resources there for people to actually find those jobs and to find those internships. And it's right at our fingertips here, actually. Sorry, anybody else wants to in on that?
Yeah, I just think actually going away, whether it's to take a break or to work abroad, is the best thing that you can do. And Killian mentioned it earlier as well, you know, like working away from home and enriching, you know, your life experience is going to be, you know, a huge plus for you as an individual, but also for your career. I think just gaining, you know, cultural experiences outside of where you grew up or where, you know, you gained your education, it really, yeah, you can't measure that. And that's been huge for me as well, like learning from other people who think differently, they have different experiences, different backgrounds, different skill sets. Then you add that to your portfolio of experiences, right? And you actually start to grow and you know, have a lot more to offer than if you were to just kind of maybe do the same thing as everybody else. So yeah, I think going abroad, again, whether it's just to sit on a beach for a year, sounds amazing, or to work, totally do that. Take those opportunities.
It may well be the last time in your life until you retire that you get an opportunity to do something like that. So
I know, I envy them.
I do. Youth is wasted on the young, as somebody said.
I know, but you see, because like it's funny, but we forget this impatience that we all had coming out. We forget this impatience that to get it started and to get stuck in, and actually what we want students and graduates to actually see is that getting started and getting stuck in can happen, you know, by, you know, getting that internship, and you know, and it doesn't have to happen in final year, and it doesn't have to happen when you're graduated. You could start in first year, setting up that summer with an internship rather than going to New York to be a barista. Why wouldn't you use Going Global, for example, and I give it a plug again, to find something that's nearly relevant, you know, and guaranteed your final year self or your graduation self is going to be really impressed with your first year self. Thanks for that, mate, you know, because now my CV as I'm coming out is looking, wow, I've got a few projects on there that I can stand over, you know. But I'm all for kind of, you know, taking that year out and traveling and working, and you know, and regardless of where you're working, you're still soaking in a culture, and that's always going to feed into whatever creative work you're doing in the future, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and I think the more experience you can get of the professional environment you see your career going down, the more experience you can get in different locations, countries, cities, the more informed you're going to be when you come home, if you want to come, if you want to come back to Ireland. I mean, I went away ostensibly for 6 months to work in London. I came back after 17 years. I loved it. I had no interest in coming back to Ireland, because there was 3 or 4 recording studios in Dublin that I could work in. In London, I think I counted 115 just in Soho alone. All very, very different, full of very different people, and cultural melting pot of the world that London and New York are. You cannot get more experience, more rich life experience than leaving home, packing your bags, getting off the plane in Stansted or whatever, and immersing yourself in that. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? You might have to buy a 100 quid ticket to come home, and you'll be home in an hour. It's like, it's not that far away.
No, it really isn't. I'm going to segue into a question here that's very specific for a second, and then I'm going to come out and actually ask you all what I want to ask you again. But so Jake has asked a question here. It's a bit of an essay now, Jake. Thanks for that. And that was probably a little bit sarcastic on my part. Hi, Dave. Sorry. Just looking at Friday's agency services, some cool web projects there. I'm wondering if you'd have any insight on these questions. What would you expect from a junior web developer regards data structures and algorithms? I've read that some companies can expect knowledge in that area from a front-end developer, even if it isn't necessary for them to know. To what extent would you expect a developer to also be a designer? And also, finally, an interview, would you use coding tests? So there's 3 that you have to remember there. So you just go with.
What was the third one?
The third one was, do you use coding tests in an interview?
Oh, right. Okay, I'll start with the first about algorithms. We'd have no expectation about algorithms at all. No, that's like the type of web development we do would be kind of PHP content management system type web development and integrations and that kind of thing. So we wouldn't be getting into algorithms or anything like that. That's not to say that other companies don't. The second one, what was the second one about?
Oh, the second one, let me go back up because I'm gone down into another question for a second. I've read that some, what would you expect a junior web to, that we did the algorithms one, and then the second one is, one second now, to what extent do you expect a developer to also be a designer?
I wouldn't expect a developer to be a designer at all. That's the kind of a hangover from 15 or 20 years ago where web designers were expected to be able to code,
to do everything.
Web developers were expected to design. So not really. I mean, I think if a developer has a good eye for detail and design and is very good at kind of replicating what the designer puts on screen, I think that's quite important. So attention to detail is important, but having the skills to actually come up with a design, no, I don't think so at all.
Okay, thanks so much.
Sorry,
and the coding, coding and interview. Do you ask people to do coding and interview?
Oh yeah, we do coding tests. Yeah, we do coding tests. So we have a kind of a multiple choice test in PHP, HTML, and CSS, and then if they pass that and it's quite good, we might ask them to do a small kind of a project that might take a couple of hours just to see what their written code is like, So
okay, yeah. Okay, thanks so much for that, Jake. I hope that kind of was okay for you. We're just going to go back into asking, okay, so before I get to my kind of final questions, and yes, we are at that point. It's now, we're 45 minutes in now, guys. It's kind of flown for me. I hope it's been the same for you. But what is it that kind of keeps you going? Or, what do you love and find inspiring about your work? What keeps you in there, like right in there? What is it that you're just, when you hit it, that's the sweet spot for you?
I think for me, it's like I love solving problems, and that might sound a bit cliched as a designer to say that we're problem solvers, but that's not every designer goes into their career thinking that they want to be a problem solver. But for me, I like solving problems, and I think there are a lot of problems to be solved today, and they're not going away, and so that kind of keeps me going, is like thinking about, oh well, I have skills or a way of thinking and a way of looking at the world that might somewhat make things more interesting, more beautiful, more like just better, works better for everyone. So that's actually kind of, it's slightly altruistic maybe, but that's you know, that's what keeps me going. Yeah.
That's a
Okay,
lovely
great.
answer.
Thanks for that, Lara. Yeah, it really is.
That's a really nice answer. Yeah.
Okay, Killian, you can get more statusy about that. What keeps you?
Well,
What
no,
really?
yeah, I mean, Lara's just yeah, she's refreshed my own mind of that thought. I finished a film last week that was premiered at the film festival last Wednesday night in the IFI, and I sat in a packed audience of I think 200 and something people watching this film on the huge screen. And I was sitting there and I was just dreading it. I hate going to these things because if there's any technical problem, I've nowhere to hide. Like if it's out of sync or if the sound drops out or something,
Yeah.
mightn't be my fault, but they're all looking at the sound mixer, you know. Anyway, long story short, it was a beautiful documentary about the North Circular Road in Dublin, and it was shot in black and white, and it was a lot of slow-mo shots of buses and Park. So there wasn't a lot of time in the budget. There was about 2 or 3 days actual work in the budget, and I looked at this film and thought, this is beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, I actually had a break of a few weeks with no work on. So I thought, I'm going to immerse myself into this film for a couple of weeks. And I grabbed some microphones. I went out and I recorded sound effects, which I don't normally do. And I worked with the director very closely on recording really good sounds that we put in the film. And I sat there in the IFI last Wednesday night with all these people and watched the film. And I was the last person in the theatre, so I had to sit right in the front row. And I sat with my neck up looking at the film. And every so often I'd turn around and look at these 200 or 300 people all fixated on the film. And that, I just went, wow, look, they're listening. They're really immersed in this beautiful surround soundscape that they're immersed in.
Yeah.
And it was a really, really nice experience. And then after that, people were coming up to me who I had no idea who they were and congratulating me and saying, "Oh, you're this guy who did the sound. It was really good. We could, spot all the details in it." And that I was like, really buoyed up after that. Which after 30 plus years of doing what I do, you can get a bit jaded. So I think every so often it's nice to take a project and personally really invest yourself in, because it does return to you.
Yeah.
All the little details, the little shots of the bird walking along the street where it picked up and swallowed a little stick or something, and we put the sound effects of the feet on it, and really went to town on it. Which for a film that had a budget for 2 or 3 days, that film got 2 or 3 weeks of love, and that was hugely rewarding for me, and it's really revitalized my passion for what I do.
Yeah, it's funny, and you rarely give that to yourself in the busyness of what you do, right? But to remember that to give that to yourself is important, because look what it's done now. You're bolstered again, and off you go again. And it kind of fades into the background or something. So lovely. Thanks so much for sharing that, Killian. Dave, what about you? What keeps you in there? What are your sweet spots?
Yeah, I think what Killian said there is a really good example. I mean, the type of project, I have a couple of things here. So the type of project where, like, obviously we're keeping an eye on time and costs and stuff like that, but you're doing a project where you're really enjoying it and you're investing a lot more time into it than you're actually being paid for, but you don't mind doing that. I think that's kind of the sweet spot. That's kind of where the passion is, and it's great to hear that, the things that keep me going. So there's two things that come to mind. One is that in my industry, it's moving incredibly quickly, and things are changing all the time, and processes are changing, technology is changing, how we do things, how we build things, and that keeps me going. And I think if I ever reach a point where I get fatigued with the change, I'm possibly getting a bit jaded, because that's just the nature of it, so I might be losing interest, or maybe I'm just a bit tired, whatever, so that's kind of fun. And also just understanding human behavior. Every project that we do will present itself with a new set of minds that we have to explore. So it could be an app, and their target user or a target customer is a new set of minds that we really have to kind of understand and get under their skin and find out what makes them tick and what their goals and motivations are. And it's always kind of interesting to see how different groups of people think and how they perceive things and how they understand things. And it always start off a project with your own assumptions, and I'm always surprised at how wrong I can often be about those assumptions. So it's kind of fun to just understand different groups of people and how they work, you know.
Yeah, that's great. And you do go in with your own assumptions always, right? So it's great to be questioning those and to be surprised by that still, to be surprised about, oh my God, actually, I did think it would be that way. But can I just ask you, because we've about 2 minutes left, because I have promised that we would finish before time. So I've one more question, and this is, you know, this is a real kind of a bullet question, okay? So really quickly, if you can, would your, in terms of kind of gaining a foothold in this industry, in your industry, from your perspective, in your particular, from where you're actually standing, you know, what would your top tips in terms of, one, the key skills that graduates, students need to be able to show, and two, in terms of what they should do, you know, to gain that foothold, you know, in your industry from where you're standing? So we might start with you, Lara, just because the guys, you started the last, just go in, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm going to maybe repeat two things that came up already, because I think they're really important and it totally resonates with me. One, I think, is, you know, learn business skills. Okay, so whether you're setting up your own business or going into a company, doesn't matter. I think as a creative, having business skills will set you up for life. And then the second one is grow your network. So I know that sounds really daunting, but actually it's the most valuable thing I've ever done is actually connect with people outside of your industry, people who you aspire to be like or who inspire you. Grow your network, nurture that network, and you know, magic things will happen from that once you start to make those connections. So business and network, you know, we talked about it earlier, but those two things would definitely be my tips.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lara. And Dave?
I think in what I do, so I user experience design, a lot of junior designers come along and they'll send me a CV, but there's no point of reference of their work. I think they think that it's not a visual thing, even though it is. So I think a presentation is really important. UX is about kind of showing the process. It's all about the process you use. So illustrate that, and you're an interface designer, design an interface to present your work. And I'm amazed how often it's overlooked. I just get a kind of a CV with their experience, and it tells me very little. So be more like a yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Dave. And Killian?
One of the most important, I actually think, looking back, well, the first proper job that I got in Dublin was with a sound studio that did radio commercials and TV commercials in the late 80s. And it was run by the boss's wife, who absolutely charmed every client that walked in the door. As soon as the client walked in the door, they were made to feel like they were the most important person in the world. She absolutely went. And I, at the time, being an 18-year-old, I thought, this is a bit over the top. You know, she's giving them coffee, she's pouring them brandies. It's only lunchtime, and I was going, what's all this about? We're here to create stuff. And when I went to London a couple of years later, I brought those skills with me, and I learned that charm and manners get you absolutely everywhere. They can cover a multitude of failings or lacking, you know, in technical skills or whatever. But if you can charm people and be pleasant to them and keep them engaged with you, that will get you very, very far. And that was a really important skill.
Yeah, because it's all about the relationship. Yeah, absolutely, all about the relationship and building relationships. Yeah, absolutely. So much. I have to say thank you so much for your time today, Lara, Dave, Killian. Really appreciated it. Great learnings for people that are watching. I've got a couple of messages here from Stefan, Lara, and Dave. Great to see you back again. From David Smith, actually. Dawn, Lara, Killian, and Dave, thank you all so much. Very insightful and honest. I know all of the attendees will be greatly encouraged as they set out in the winding road ahead of them. So very best from David Smith as well. And thank you all so much. Really appreciated you being here. That was a great discussion. And we'll be back in touch again, no doubt. And thank you so much, everybody, for being here and watching this. It's being recorded as well, so thanks to those who are watching the recording. Okay, thanks a million, guys.
Super.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.